Hello, yes, it's Joe here for Joyrider TV, and today we're going to go through the assembly of the Hobie FX1. This technique and process will be the same for other similar catamarans. Of course, it will be very similar for other catamarans from Hobie, such as the Tiger, the Pacific, the Wildcat, anything else that bolts together like this. And the methods here can be applied to any type of catamaran. So I think we'll dive in. Okay, so before we begin the platform assembly, a few things that we've done already is we've cleaned up on the top of the hull there where the beam is going to go. This would have the residue of old sealant, which we want to get rid of. What we've also done is we've taken the nuts and the bottom washers off the bolts, and we've just put them in a hatch cover. That will just make life a bit easier. And now that we've done that, what we can do is we can put the new sealant onto the hull. So what we've got here is some silicone-based sealant. Any sort of bathroom sealant will do. And we're just going to put a circle around each hole, thus. Okay, we haven't done such a great job there, so just to make sure that seals properly, just going to come in with the licked finger just to make sure we have got a good perimeter there and we're not going to have any water getting in. Okay, and then before we offer up the beam, just with the bolts, what we should have is on the top of the bolts should be the stainless washer, and then underneath the stainless washer should be the plastic washer. That's just going to stop any sort of chemical reaction between the stainless and the aluminium. Okay, and then what we're going to do, making sure that the beam is around the right way, put the back beam on with the boat on its side. This is what I find to be the easiest, especially if you're on your own. Okay, and then whilst keeping that in position, we're just going to take a washer and a nut for each of the bolts in turn. Hand inside the hull, right up to the elbow there. Just doing that up by hand to make sure that this isn't going to come off. Okay, so that top one's on. Done the top one first, so that's going to hold it. Now, right up to the elbow. The holes of the hatches on the FX1 are quite, well, they're smaller than on the Tiger and the Pacific. It does make it a bit of a squeeze getting your arm in. So perhaps if you can recruit someone with smaller arms, that's going to help. Okay, and we've got the holes roughly the right width apart. So we can pull this hull down. And then we'll just see if this hull is in the right spot. Okay, we're a bit narrow there, so we'll take it out a bit. Okay, so there we are, she's together at the back. So I'm going to put the nuts on loosely again on the port side, and then we'll get the front beam on before we tighten all the bolts up. Okay, and then if you're confused at all as to which side is the front of the beam. The spinnaker pole fitting is at the front. Okay, and then we might just need a bit of a wiggle to get the bolts to line up correctly with the holes, and there we are, that one's in. Okay, so now we can start to tighten it up. It's a 17mm spanner which we'll use on the inside, and you could use a 17mm spanner or socket on the top. We've got 2 nuts for the bottom, for the inside of each bolt, but what we'll do is we'll tighten the first one up and then we'll put the second one on afterwards. The second nut is just there to stop. Okay, so we'll start off with the inside one there. So you really have to go right into the elbow here to be able to get to the nut. And then what you can do is, once there's a bit of tension on the nut, that tension will actually hold the spanner on the inside against the bulkhead, which means you can then use one hand to put downward pressure on the bolt head and the other one to wind it. It is quite common on these for the socket to slip off the top, which could lead to you losing the skin off your knuckles, which is quite painful. Been there several times. All right, so it's getting yeah, see, she just wants to slip off, so I'm going to put a bit more pressure on the top. Okay, and that's the spot. And then once those are on, we'll take the other 2 nuts and we'll just put them on by hand first. Oh. Cleaning the threads up on the bolts really pays off once you get to this stage. And then with the spanner, we're just gonna, this is the really awkward bit, or the most awkward bit. It's not that bad. Okay, so we're just tightening that up as much as we can against the other nut, and that will stop the nuts from coming loose. Ooh. Okay, and then we just have to do that another 3 times and then the platform will be done. Okay, so there we go, the platform is complete. Might have lost a little bit of skin off the forearms going in and out of the hulls, but not to worry. Next step, the trampoline. Okay, so we're going to start off by inserting the front edge of the trampoline into the track in the front beam. So of course it's important to make sure we are putting it in the right way up. So that is with the pocket and the toe straps on the top. Everything is easier if you get it wet first. It will just slide in a lot easier. As with most of it, it is a bit easier if you've got 2 people doing it. One person can feed it in, the other person can pull it, but generally it's not too bad with this feeding it in from the end. Oh, we've just snagged it a bit there, so I'll just pull it back, unsnag it, and then there we go. And now that she's in, we just want to get it pretty much central. So we've gone a little bit too far. So we're just going to line up this hole with the mast base, and that way we know that the trampoline is in the middle. Okay, once that's done, we'll then just tie the sides up. So we'll go through this eye here, and then we're going to tie it off to this eyelet in the trampoline, just using a bowline there. And we'll do the same on the other side. Okay, the next stage here is we're going to insert the fiberglass rod through the back. This is another one that it's a bit easy with two people, but with a bit of perseverance, you can do it on your own. And of course the FX1 is a single-handed boat, so you should be able to do it on your own. We're going to tie up the other end of the sides. We're not going to pull this tight just yet, but we're just going to pull it just to get the trampoline off the floor. You'll see here, I've tied a little bowline there. Basically, when this is pulled tight, get that bowline as far up there as possible, and we'll use that to get a bit of purchase. And then we'll take the rope, go through the eye on the back beam there, and then through that bowline, through the loop. You could use a different type of knot if you want. And then we're just going to pull that, not so it's really tight, but just so that there's a bit of tension in it. And we'll do the same on the other side. Okay, so next, just do double check that the plastic rod is even in the back of the trampoline, so you've got the same amount poking out of each end. Yeah, and we're going to lace it around the plastic rod before we start putting it on the boat. And we're just going to make sure we go up every time, pulling it through, so we've got just a little bit left there, and then we're just going to work our way along. Okay, so now that's done all the way along, we can start lacing it up. So we're going to pull it underneath, and the way the rope's going to go, it's a good idea to pull a bit of tension on here as you go. We're going to go over the top of the lacing post, over the next lacing post, that's going to go down, and then we're going to grab the next piece, and that's going to go around the lacing post as well. And we'll continue in this way, pulling tension on as we go along. Okay, and then when we get to the end, I'm just going to take a full lap around the lacing post here. In fact, this rope is suggesting that we take it on the inside there. Full lap round. And then we're just going to tie that off fairly loosely, so that holds as we tighten the trampoline up. So having done that, because we were pulling the lacing on from the port side first, it has pulled the trampoline over. Perhaps it's a very small amount, but what we'll do is we'll use the sides to pull that back into the middle. Okay, so to pull this one tight, just going to untie that quick release knot that I tied earlier. To get a bit of purchase, I'm just going to wrap it around a hammer, something to pull it, and then I'll pull that as tight as I can. And then with that as tight as we can, we could just use our fingers as a nipper there. We'll put it through that fair lead again. And we're going to tie a round turn and 2 half hitches. So the round turn part, we're going to, we're going to go all the way around. and that will take the load off the rest of the knots, so it means we will be able to untie it in the future. And then we'll just put our hitches in there. Okay, and then the tail here, we're going to take the tail, go back through the fair lead, and then up to the eye in the trampoline, and then back through the fair lead again. This fair lead is becoming quite busy. And then we'll just pull that on. And then this time, we're just going to put 2 half hitches in straight off. And that's that side done. Before we start really tightening it, we're just going to get the trampoline really wet, and that will allow it to stretch more as we tighten it, and then as it dries that will contract slightly, making it the tightest trampoline we could possibly have. As well as the trampoline, we'll get the lacing wet at the back there. That'll help it to slide as we pull it on. Okay, I think that is not going to get any wetter than that. That is totally wet. So there's many ways that we could tighten the trampoline, but the method that we seem to have stuck on here for these sort of boats is the claw hammer technique. We're going to use a claw hammer, a cloth, and we're using these long handled grips for the nipper. So what we're going to do is we're just going to put the cloth to protect the beam, then we're going to put the claw hammer in, and we're going to use the hammer as a lever, and then with the tension on we'll nip it, and then we'll move to the next station. Okay, so then when we get to the end, kind of like what we did before, we'll tuck that on the inside, holding the tension on, and then we'll take a complete lap. We'll go up the inside again. And we're just going to tie him off there. Okay, and the only bit left to do now is the side on the port side. Okay, so there we are, the trampoline is on, that's done. Next, let's move on to the rudders. Okay, so if you haven't serviced your rudders for a while, the ideal thing to do here is to service them as you put them on, but you can check out the servicing your rudders video just here. Otherwise, we're just going to pop them on. So we're just going to line up the holes. We'll take our rudder pin, and ideally we'll insert it from the top. And then we'll just give that and if it's definitely lined up but it's not going in, that's actually quite a good sign. It means it's going to be tight, and we could just use a hammer just to give it a light tap just to get it to go in the rest of the way. Then once it's in, we need to put our split ring into the bottom to make sure that it can't fall off if and when the boat is upside down. Okay, so we'll do the same the other side. on all of the Hobie connecting bars, the adjustment will always be on the left side, on the port side. So it doesn't matter what system you've got, that'll be on the port side on the Hobie system. Okay, and then to attach it, making sure the fitting for the tiller extension is on the top. This is pretty straightforward. That will just slot over the top, and then the clip just over the top. Okay, so there we are, the rudders are on. Next step, I think we should put the mast up. Okay, so before we get the mast, we're going to attach the bridle wires at the front of the boat. So we've got the 2 bridle wires here. This is of course on the version without a furler for the jib. And on this version, we've got the 2 bridle wires connected with the pin through the middle. Then we've got the shackle and the chain plate there. Okay, so before we're going to attach the bridle wires to the boat, it is worth just checking your bowsprit, because maybe your bridle wires for the bowsprit need to be attached at the same time, and you don't want to have the mast up only to realize that you have to drop the mast again to fit the bowsprit. So worth checking there. And then very straightforward, we're just going to pin this to the bow tang here on the boat, putting the pin so it goes downwards, so if the split ring was to come out, you're less likely to lose the pin altogether, and also so it's less likely to catch on your spinnaker. And we'll do the same the other side. Okay, so we've got the mast. If you need to know about how to rig the mast, check out the how to rig the mast video. First thing we want to do is just check these shackles are tight. So I'm going to use an adjustable spanner to get a bit of purchase on there. And then we're just going to nip that up. Okay, and then to make sure that the rigging is going to be correct from the top, we're going to take the shroud and just making sure it's not tangled around anything, we're just going to pull it all the way back, making sure it's not going under the hull, and we'll just get that all the way here, and then we'll do the same the other side. The one which can throw you off a little bit is the spinnaker halyard. So what we're going to do with the spinnaker halyard is we're just going to go down the mast. That's the forestay, we'll get him out of the way. We'll go down the mast, and one end of the spinnaker halyard, what we like to do, which is a good idea, that's the forestay again, just getting him out of the way. The spinnaker halyard's going to go in front of everything, and then through a loop which is just shock cord tied between the spreaders there, and that stops that from flapping around. And then from there we've just got both ends tied off at the bottom of the mast for now. Okay, and then what we've got is we've got our shroud on the top hole of the stay adjuster on one side. That's going to make it much easier to get the forestay attached, and then we'll move that afterwards. Coming down, we've got the twisty bit, and then on our boat we've got the block for the spinnaker shackled on there. So the way this is going to work, that block needs to be in front, good idea just to check that this is tight, so just give that a little pull there with the spanner. Yes, she's good. So then that shackle pin is going to go through of course through the shackle, through the twisty bit, and then that's going to screw in. So depending on which way your anchor bar is, this block either wants to be in front or on the inside, if you think about how your spinnaker sheets are going to be. And then we'll use the spanner again to tighten this shackle. This shackle does need tightening every time you go out sailing, or checking at least, because if that came undone, then your mast would come down. Not a good look. On the stay adjuster on the other side, there's no need to put that on the top hole. Doing it on one side is sufficient, and also that means you know which hole you're aiming for when you do pull the rig tension on, by keeping it in the same hole. And then just one thing that's worth checking before you put the mast up is just the condition of your ball there for the mast step. If it's looking like a really bad shape, or you're starting to get this bolt poking through, then that's definitely time to replace your ball. Okay, so for the raising of the mast, I've recruited Marco, and with the mast foot you can put a pin through, but if you've got somebody to help you, it's much better just to have them in charge of security on your mast foot, because you can't trust that that ball is going to stay on. So I'm going to get the top of the mast and start, get it in position so it goes at 90 degrees. If you've got a third person, it's nice to have them perhaps pulling on the trapeze wires as well, to take a bit of the load off. Okay, and just as the mast's getting to the top, worth having a look at your the bottom of your shrouds, just to make sure they're not twisted. And then Marco's just taken the forestay, he's checked but it's not caught around anything, and then he's just attaching that to the chain plate on the front there. Thank you. So on the chain plate on the front, when we take the mast down, it is a good idea of course to leave the pin in the chain plate on the hole where it was before, so then again you know which hole to go for when you put the mast up. At the mast base, if you have put a bolt or a pin through the hole there, do remember to take it out before you go sailing. Just the only purpose of it is for the raising of the mast, but as I said, it's much better to have somebody supervising the bottom of the mast, because this ball only got a plastic thread, so that could pull off, which could have some negative consequences. So now that the mast's up, there's quite a few little jobs to do to finish the boat off. The first one we'll do is the trapezes. So we'll just look up the mast, making sure it's not twisted around anything, and then this of course does come down to a bit of personal preference, but I like to go through the back hole in the trampoline, and then what we like to do here to give the trapeze elastic a bit more stretch is under the trampoline we take it forwards around the dolphin striker and then to the other side. Means it's a longer piece of elastic, means that it will stretch more. Okay, so there we are, we've got him. Just going to take him back to the same hole as the other side. Up through the trampoline, and just to hold that while we're getting the trapeze wire organised, I'm just gonna tie that loosely around the shroud, and then I'll get the trapeze wire. Again, checking that it's not twisted around anything, and then we're just going to use our kite surfer's knot to tie the elastic to the trapeze. So we've got a knot in the end there, knot in the end there. We'll tie the thinner onto the thicker. We'll just go around, one hitch, and that's all it takes, because the knot in the end will stop that from pulling off. There we are, trapeze done. Then attaching the boom, very straightforward. Just got this gooseneck hinge on the mast, and that's just going to pin on there. Just make sure that when you put the boom on, you are putting it in the right part of the downhaul rope, so the downhaul goes evenly either side of the boom. With the downhaul rope, we've got a bit of an innovation here. This is a very good idea. We take our downhaul rope from the side, and then this block is tied to another block on the other side with a piece of elastic going across, and then it goes back to the trapeze. And what that means is both you can get the downhaul while you're on the trapeze, but also if you've capsized and you need to get back on the boat, you can use the downhaul rope to pull the trapeze to the front, and then you can use the trapeze to get back on. That was Stefan's idea, and a good one. Okay, so next we need to put the rig tension on. This stay adjuster is on hole number 2. On the other side, as we know, it's on the top. So we're gonna need to recruit some help for this. Okay, so I'm gonna hang off the trapeze, and while I'm doing that, Marco's gonna take the pin out and move it down onto hole number 2. So I'm about 90 kilos. To get the rig tension on, I just have to give it a little bounce to get enough tension, but that'll be about 28 on the loose gauge. Okay, just a small tip is to rotate the pin so that the ring is going down there, so it's not going to get caught on the shroud cover when you pull it down. Okay, so the mast rotation control on here is very simple. What we're going to do is we're just going to take our line, pass it around the end of the spanner bar, and then those two ends are just going to go down through the hole in the middle of the trampoline. And then same for both sides. We're just going to grab the rope, take it out from underneath the trampoline, and then this one, it could come up through the trampoline or underneath the trampoline, whatever you feel runs better on your boat, but then it will go through the cleat. And then there are many ways that you can finish it off, but for now I'm just going to tie mine off with a bowline to the shackle for the spinnaker block. So we'll start off by attaching the end of the pole to the front beam. Quite simple on here. Of course, if you've got a different boat, it might be a little bit different, but on most of the Hobies it's the same. Just a pin through, and there we are. And then it does make the rest of it a little bit easier if we just hang the pole at this stage, so we can just pop that pole hanging rope. Okay, and then the end bridle wires should be fairly straightforward. Okay, on this one, in fact, we've got the bridle wire and then we've got an extension rope there. We've obviously needed to lift the end of the pole in the past. So what we'll do is we'll just tie that off where it seems to have been before, and then we might have to adjust that afterwards to make sure that the pole is central. So then we'll have to do that on the other side as well, of course, trying to get it approximately the same, well, as close to being exactly the same as possible. Okay, so now we can see those are pretty loose. To check that it is central, we're going to pull some tension on the line in the middle now, and then we can look down the pole and make sure it is central. Okay, so we're just going to take this line and pass it again through the shackle at the bottom here. And then what we'll do is we'll pull up slightly with one hand and then we'll pull the rope with the other hand. So we're just putting a little bit of bend, just a little bit of bend into the bowsprit, which means that when the spinnaker's pulling, the bowsprit isn't going to be bending to straight or beyond straight. If the bowsprit can bend beyond straight, that's when it could break. So that's just what we're trying to prevent there, any movement at all in the bowsprit. And I'm just going to tie that off with some half hitches. But of course, what you've got on your boat may be slightly different. So there we go. Incidentally, this blue rope that I've got here, this is for our mooring system here. So you don't need to worry about that one. Okay, so now that's all tensioned up. Looking down the pole, we can see that it looks good. It's very straight, right in the center. If you're having to fit your own intermediate pole bridles and you haven't got any on there, then having as little going on at the hull as possible is better, because of course sometimes this is going to be going through the water. So what I'm going to do is just tie a kite surfer's knot, so not in the end, so that we really have got as little as possible going on there. Of course there's a number of ways we could do this, so I'm just going to take this around the pole. We'll pull on a little bit of tension and then we're just going to tie that off there. And then on this side, the question of should the intermediate pole bridle go underneath or on top, it just depends at which sort of angle your chute is sitting. If it's sitting quite high, then underneath is going to be better, whatever doesn't distort the chute as much. Okay, and on this side, what we could do is really crank it on pretty tight, because we're just pulling against the rope on the other side. We're not going to bend the pole there. Okay, and then we'll tie that off. And then one modification that we do here is we just take a rope, we tie it around the pole here. That rope then sits inside the groove of the spinnaker chute coming out here, and then we're going to take that down to the bow tang and tie that off, and that's just going to stop the chute from moving up and down, which is going to slow down your hoists or drops. So there we go, we've actually put a little purchase loop in there so that we can pull it fairly tight. Of course we don't want to go bending the pole, so if this, yeah, that one's gone a bit loose, so we're going to have to tighten that one up again, because we don't want the weight of the pole going on this one. Okay, there we go. And then to finish off everything, what we'll do is we'll put some tape over all of the knots, all of the split rings, anything at all that could either come undone or catch on the spinnaker. So this inside of the chute, we're just going to tie off around the fitting at the end, pulling that pretty tight, and then we can tie that off. So for the other end, this will differ from boat to boat, but on this boat, what we're going to do is tie this off onto this fair lead that's holding this block here. Again, we're going to get that pretty tight. Okay, so just threading the spinnaker halyard. I've already tied the loose end of the halyard just to the bridle wires at the front, and the rope coming down the mast, this is the one that went through the bungee loop on the mast. This is a single line system. This is just going to come through the block on the pole, and then we've got the tack line which comes to a double block. This is for the single line system, which means you just pull one rope and it pulls the spinnaker up and out. For the double line system, do check out my previous how to fit a spinnaker pole and spinnaker videos, as you can see here. But on this system, we're just going to take the spinnaker halyard, so it's from the block on the pole, then through here, and then that will go through the cleat on the front beam. So then with the tensioning for the spinnaker halyard, we've just got a piece of elastic with a block which is going through these small holes on the trampoline and then coming under, tying off on the tramp lacing. But if you haven't got those small holes, absolutely anything will do it. You could take the elastic and just tie it off on these cringles here on the side, or whatever works. You might have to experiment with the tension in that elastic and where you mount it to make it so that it's tight but not too tight. So we're going to take our spinnaker halyard through the block here, and then most commonly the end of the halyard will become the retrieval line for the spinnaker, and that would usually go down through a hole in the trampoline. But on our FX1s, we've put these blocks on the front beam, which we just felt gives a bit of a cleaner pull when you're taking it down. So we go through the hole there and then through the hole in the back of the chute. We'll just pull a little bit through, and then to thread the retrieval line, we're just going to put a tiller extension down the spinnaker chute. You might need to bend it a little bit to get it in, but just make sure there's nothing sharp on there which could damage the chute, of course, all the way to the end. And then we're going to tie the end of the retrieval line, which is the end of the spinnaker halyard, of course, around the end of that tiller extension. I'm going to use a clove hitch, but anything will do. And then we'll just push the first bit out just to make sure that knot doesn't slip off. And then we can pull the tiller extension out, and there he is, tied on there. So don't let go of this when you untie it, because it might shoot back into the chute. So I'm just going to tie that off to the bridle wire, and then we're ready to rig the spinnaker. Okay, so rigging the spinnaker, we're going to start off with the tack, which is the front bottom corner. This is going to be the corner of the sail that will generally have the sailmaker's logo. And then we're just going to tie this onto the tack line using a bowline. You could put plastic balls on all of the lines, which will mean you don't have to tie knots. I know a Dutchman who likes that technique. He doesn't like tying knots, but for me a bowline is fine. Okay, next we're going to find the retrieval points. So here's one. Just working our way down the luff of the spinnaker. There is a bit of wind today, so that's helping to blow the spinnaker out, making it a bit easier to find the retrieval points. There's two. And there's three. Of course, we're making sure that it's not twisted as we're collecting these points. So keeping the points in the right order, we can then tie on our retrieval line. So it's another job that would be easier to do with two people, but it is a single-handed boat, so it would also be easier to do when there's no wind at all, but you can't always choose what the wind is doing. So I'm just going to pass the retrieval line, bottom one first, and then going up. There we are, through two. Now I'll get my hand back, and then we'll put it through the last point on the sail, which is usually a bit of webbing or a hole that will pass the retrieval line through, and here we're going to tie it on using a bowline. Nice. Okay, what we could do next is attach the halyard. So just going to work our way down the luff of the spinnaker to make sure it's not twisted or in any way wrong. Okay, and then we've got the head. The head we can usually identify by it being the only corner with two coloured edges, or it's the narrowest angle comes to a point. All right, so once we've got that, we'll take our halyard. Good idea to look up it, just making sure it's not twisted around anything. And then again, I'm going to tie this on using a bowline, but of course on your own boat you might have put a ball on here. I wouldn't recommend like a carabiner clip or something clippy, because that's a lot of weight to have up your mast, so a bowline does well. And then to make sure that when you put the sheets on, the sheets are correct, what I like to do is actually to pull the spinnaker into the chute at this point, making sure it's uncleated. You can then pull it in, making sure that the clew, the corner without a rope attached, isn't going in, because we need that to put our sheets on. And then with our sheets, we're going to go through the spinnaker block, making sure it's going through the right way. So we're going to pull it, and it should engage the ratchet when you pull to sheet in, not when you go to sheet out. That will upset whoever's trimming the spinnaker. Okay, so I'm just going to chuck that across the boat so we can do that on the other side. Okay, so we're then going to take that around the front of the forestay, but behind the spinnaker halyard, and we can then tie that on. We're using a strop on our boats, and the way that we like to tie them is with a double sheet bend onto that strop. Check out my video on knots if you don't know your double sheet bend. Okay, and then the sheet coming from this side, very straightforward. Just going to come back here, and again we're going to tie that onto this small strop using a double sheet bend. We can then just pull the rest of the spinnaker into the chute. So there we go, there's our FX1 ready to roll. For hoisting the mainsail and putting the main sheet on, do check out the video on hoisting the Tiger mainsail. It's exactly the same in every way, apart from how big it is, of course. I hope this has been helpful and informative to you. Do give the video a like if you liked it. Don't forget to subscribe to Joyrider TV if you're not yet subscribed. And if you'd like to help to support Joyrider TV and you like these videos, then do head over to my Patreon page where you can help to support the channel. Thank you very much, and we'll be back more with some soon. Or we'll be back soon with some more on Joyrider TV. Thank you.